and welcome back to the channel. We are live yet again for our fifth Meet the Expert. Oh boy, what a journey we have been on. We've been down deep into the ocean. We've met with experts who study bears. We've been out in Hungary to see venomous snakes. We have been across the world chatting to fantastic, inspirational scientists and experts and conservationists from all over the world and National Geographic fellows about their incredible research. And today is no different. I'm sad to say that today is the last of our Meet the Expert series, but we thought we'd go out with an absolute bang with our fantastic guest today, Kevin McLean, who I'll introduce to you very shortly. But before I do, I've talked about this before. I've talked about the mysteries of rainforests and how they're a full sensory experience. And if you're watching and you've been in the middle of a rainforest, you know that your eyes are often drawn high up into the canopy of those trees. It's a world that we know very little about. It's full of mystery, it's full of sounds. You may see tree fall, you may see a blur moving from tree to tree, you may hear noises, howler monkeys. There's a lot that we don't know about that world up in the canopy, and that's where we are going today. Now, if you're new around here, hello, I'm Lizzie Daly. I'm a biologist and a wildlife TV host, here to bring you yet another fantastic live Q&A. And if you are new around here, if you know the drill, then I want to hear from you. Get your questions into us live today, into our fantastic guest, Kevin McLean, who's going to answer all your fantastic tropical rainforest questions about the mysteries high up in the canopy. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear what your favorite tree-dwelling species may be. So do get in touch throughout today's live. Now, our guest today, so exciting. As a biologist, I get super excited about the idea that there's still so much on this planet that we don't know. There's still so much mystery out there, and it's Kevin's job to essentially bust that myth. Yeah, he's an ecologist. He essentially spends his life studying wildlife high up in the canopies of trees from across the world. He's been to Panama, he's been to the Ecuadorian Amazon, he's been to Borneo, and he has seen and tracked so many different species by using motion sensor cameras to capture new behaviors and new animals that we just don't know enough about. And he really has tracked it all, from three-toed sloths to anteaters to flying squirrels. This is a man who knows so much about this strange and wonderful environment, and he's here with us live. Hello, Kevin.
Hey, how's it going?
I tell you what, it's just got a lot better for me. I am amazed by your job. You know, as a scientist, you have kind of this idea of what it's going to be like. You literally live up to that expectation in your job. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really exciting to see what some of the other scientists have been up to as well.
For sure. And your job, I think it's fair to say, is very specialist, but actually quite general. And I'm going to go into a little bit about what you actually do with your cameras a bit later on. But I want to start with perhaps the most obvious place is living or breathing and researching in this environment that we really know little about. Why high up in the canopy of rainforest? What was it about these environments that inspired you?
Man, gosh, that's a question that I definitely continued to ask myself as things got more and more inconvenient. But yeah, I think like there in a lot of the research that is done, in especially in remote places, we like it can be sort of influenced by like what we kind of have access to, what is most what's more like easiest to get to. So places that are like difficult for us as people to access tend to have less information, less research, and it doesn't mean that they're less important or anything like that. It's just that's not where that effort is concentrated. So I sort of saw that there at the time I was starting a lot of this research, there was a lot of new methods in terms of using these camera traps and how to like count up populations based on all those photos. But it was all on the ground, and I was really interested in rainforests in particular. The majority of mammal species spend at least part of their life up in the trees, whether they're foraging up there or sleeping up there, and some of them live their entire lives. So it's and a lot of those species are really important to the forest as a whole. So I just knew that there was a little bit of a gap in terms of what our knowledge was, and
Right.
wanted to sort of jump in there.
Yeah, and jump in there, you really did. I mean, I rattled off a few of the places that you've worked, you know, Panama and Borneo. What has been your favorite experience in the middle of a rainforest? Do you have a favorite? Is that unfair to ask?
Oh man, gosh, that's a really it is a really tough question because you know like the at sort of a really base level, just like being up in that in the canopy is a very different experience, a very different view, like literally of a forest. We're so used to looking up at everything and having everything look down, and then you get, you know, like 50 meters up into a tree, and all of a sudden the birds are flying below you and you're looking eye to eye at another animal, you know, at the next tree next to you. So you know, I think that the animals get as confused as anyone else is that I'm up there, but it's definitely, you know, it's just a very, very special experience. And I think it's not easy to get up there, but I think I always have this sort of reminder at the beginning of a new field project where the first time I get up into another tree, I like get up there and I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is why I'm doing this. It's really amazing. It's a part of the forest that one, we don't spend a lot of time in, but also that, you know, there's just not a lot of people that get to have this view, and it's a really, really special experience just to be there.
Yeah, we actually got the most glorious picture on
Oh
screen
my
right now.
God.
Tell us more about
Yeah,
what
it's a really it's a tough smile to love, I guess. But yeah, so this is a dusky leaf monkey. This is in Penang in Malaysia.
wow.
And this is they're smart animals. It's a monkey, a type of langur. And this guy's just checking out the camera. The cameras themselves, they're like not totally inconspicuous. They look like this. And so, you know, it's like a hunk of plastic that wasn't there the day before and probably smells like me a little bit. And so they come up and check it out, and we just happen to catch this one kind of mugging for the camera a little bit. So
Very curious animals, and
yeah,
I'm sure we'll
yeah.
see more of those pictures later on, because you have done a lot with camera traps, and obviously setting up this environment is a really important part of what you do.
Mhm.
But you mentioned a few things that happen, you know, birds flying underneath you. If someone is watching that hasn't been into a rainforest, how can you convey what it's like to be in this environment, and to really be up high in this mysterious part of this environment? How would you best describe it?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, I think part of it is like it takes so much work to get up there, just from like, you know, getting your equipment up there and then hauling yourself up there. You know, you're by the time you get up into the canopy, inevitably you're just sort of catching your breath. And it's kind of like that moment if you've ever like you know, hiked up a mountain or something like that. For at some point, like just before you get to the top, you're just so exhausted that all you're thinking about is just being tired. And then you finally get a chance to stop and you look around, and that's sort of what it feels like. That's sort of the best like the best comparison I can make is like for a long time you're just focusing on your own well-being, and then you stop and look around. So
Right.
yeah.
And I love how you just kind of whisked off. Oh yeah, you just go up a tree. For everyone that's watching, I mean, let's, for example, I was in Borneo last year. The tallest yellow Moranti tree, the tallest tree, 330 feet, is it? Like 100 meters? Just
Yeah.
enormous. So tell me the process of going into the rainforest and lugging up all that gear that can be, what, 80 pounds in weight?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's no, it's not exactly an easy process, that's for sure. And I think as I started doing this, I realized why there hadn't been so many people doing canopy research. Yeah, so this is all of the equipment. This isn't necessarily what I would bring up in one trip, but this is what I would bring into the field, like for an expedition of some kind.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah, like it starts off. I go out into the forest without any like climbing gear at all, and I'm just looking for trees that that will be sort of good for whatever project we're working on. Sometimes we're looking for fruiting trees. Sometimes we're looking for trees that we know animals nest in. Other times we're just looking for trees we know they move through, but they're not feeding in. So it depends on what it is. And you go and identify all those trees. And then also you're looking at sort of the general health of that tree. You have to look for any rotting at the base or any branches that aren't looking so good, or and making sure that the vegetation is really full on those trees, because you're literally putting your life on all those branches. So I spend a lot of time just looking at sort of the general health of the tree, looking to see if there's like wasp or bee nests or something like that I might run into. So all of that happens before I even like bring a rope out. And then from there, the way we get into the trees, I have this really long, a really tall slingshot. It's maybe like 7 or 8 feet tall. And there's like a little bean bag. Yeah, this is a friend of mine that was using it. There's a little like sort of bean bag thing in the slingshot that's attached to a string that goes into that little box. And so we shoot that little bean bag, that weight bag, over a branch. That gets the string over the branch, and then we can tie the rope to that string, and then we can pull the rope over. And we'll either attach the rope up at the top of the branch, or we'll attach it back down on the ground, depending on how tall the tree is. And then I can just climb up.
How many shots? How many shots does it take?
Oh gosh, I will allot at least a half day for shooting a line into the tree, because I just never know. There have been times, very few, where I get it in like 2 or 3 shots or something. But I've also spent 3 days trying to get into one tree that I knew I had to get into.
Really?
So yeah, I mean, also I don't know. I didn't use giant slingshots as a child, so I had to learn how to do this. Like, I didn't have a lot of like history of practice or anything. Yeah. So when I first started doing it, I was bad at it. And so you just have to like get better and better and keep practicing.
And all jokes aside, I mean, you are in a dense environment as it is, and of course you've got all those variables to deal with, animals in that environment and conditions, etc. So it's a difficult job before you even begin, right? Really?
Yeah. I mean, most of the places that I've worked recently, we've had trails to sort of get to certain parts of the research site. But then at some point you'll see a tree like sticking up above the rest, and then you have to get yourself to that tree. So you end up going off trail, falling down hills and, sliding in the mud and whatnot. You just, there's a lot of very dense vegetation. So some of the challenge when you get to that tree is finding just a little hole in that vegetation that you can shoot the line through, and the lines just get stuck on everything. And it's not an easy process, but I think untangling string at this point is now like a therapeutic exercise for me, if anything. So yeah, you just spend a lot of time arguing with string, essentially. So,
do you have any particular stories that really stand out for you? A particular journey to find a certain tree, or a tree that you spent a lot of time in carrying out your research?
That's another good question. Actually, you know what, the photo that you just showed of me up in that tree, there's I've climbed many trees at this point. I don't always remember all of them, but that one that you showed, I definitely do, because that was one of them where I spent half of the afternoon of one entire day, and then the morning of another day trying to get that shot. It's really hard to tell, from where this picture is taken, but it was actually a sort of large, like a long distance from the trunk of the tree, which makes shooting it a little bit harder. And then there was a small window that we had to get the weight bag through on that branch, so that it wouldn't hit another branch above it and everything. So it just took tons and tons and tons of shots. And then at some point you just get tired and you get frustrated, and some choice words are used, and you just have to take a break and eat a sandwich or something, and then come back to it. but yeah, it's really, it tests your patience in a lot of ways, for sure.
I can only imagine. What I like about these stories is it's the real side of sometimes being a scientist. And actually it takes integrity and perseverance, and all of that comes with before even setting up a camera trap, which is absolutely fabulous. I want to talk about that shortly, but before we do, once you're up in a tree, you're in that environment, there's lots going on around you. What's the process then? How long are you in that tree for? And is there anything that happens to you in like where do you go to the bathroom? Tell me the
Oh
basics.
goodness, yeah. Really just getting into the personal details of it. Yeah, no, I mean, I try to not have to go to the bathroom in the tree at all. Actually, I don't think I've ever had to do that.
Right.
But I just, like it really depends on what the tree is. So yeah, in this photo you can see like off to the right, there's a camera that is down that branch, and you can see my the white rope going off there. So
Yeah.
in this tree in particular, I not only had to go straight up, but I had to move laterally into the tree. So I had to shoot the line over that first branch, and then I had to toss another weight bag over to the branch that the white rope is around now. And so that process can take forever as well. It's weird. It's almost like playing some sort of weird carnival game where you're like tossing the weight bag to get over the branch, and then you're just pulling on the string a bunch of times to get it to swing back to you in the right direction. So it's I don't know. I like in a weird way, like those are the some of the skills I developed the most while I was in grad school, which was not something I was really expecting. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to like wager any bets right now, but I will say I'm pretty humble about most of my skills and knowledge, but I will say I'm pretty good at swinging a weight bag in a tree. So yeah.
So you'd be probably the best person to take to a carnival, actually, as you just get
I
all
mean,
the points.
maybe. Yeah.
And again, you just talk so casually about some of these skills, but they're so necessary. And picking those correct lateral branches are integral to getting the right footage that you need, right? So
Yeah.
tell me more. How many camera traps would you set up in a tree, and what is it that you're trying to capture?
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of depends on the project. Especially when I was first starting, it takes so much, it takes so much time to get up into that tree. I wanted all of that effort to be for something. But so I would set up a whole bunch of cameras. I would set up 3 or 4 cameras in a single tree, which then adds even more time because you're having to get to 3 or 4 different points in the tree. Like once you get into the center of the crown, you can kind of look around and see
Wow.
where a camera could go and where animals might be walking from one branch to the next. You can really see where certain branches connect to each other, where animals might be moving. So you can spot those places, but it takes a long time. So I would initially I would put a bunch of cameras into a single tree just because I was really nervous about not getting anything, and
Right.
this like sort of having nightmares about an animal moving through my tree and not actually going by my cameras. So, but yeah, I think over time, you sort of figure out the best places to put things, the places that are most realistic to actually get yourself and a camera to. And sometimes, it's more important to have cameras in a bunch of different trees, like have more cameras spread out throughout the forest rather than a concentration of cameras in a few trees. So.
And you mentioned earlier that sometimes you put them in fruiting trees or near nests.
Yeah.
Would you ever put one, say, near an orangutan nest in Borneo, or?
Oh goodness, I would not want to go near an orangutan's nest. But
Health and safety as well to
yeah,
consider when you're
yeah.
up there.
I do, am never like purposely going anywhere that I know I'm going to encounter an animal in the tree. Most of the species in the canopy are actually nocturnal. They're active at night. So there have definitely been plenty of trees I've been in where there were animals sleeping somewhere in in the trunk or in a nest above me or something like that. But I'm trying to do my best to not disturb what is already there. I've not, I've not done a lot in terms of just like specifically monitoring one nest. But we're often looking more at sort of the population of species or the community of species that's coming through a certain point in the forest. So yeah, I really sort of do my best not to disturb what's up there
Yeah,
and leave
absolutely.
it in the same condition that it was in. So
Yeah, and obviously anyone that's been in a rainforest, I mean, you'd rarely see it happen anyway, someone being high up in a canopy, but you guys are professionals, you know what you're doing. So important to get in and out, yeah, without any disturbance. I have a question that's come in. Is
yeah.
that the tallest tree out of Tawau, Sabah of Borneo Island? Was the question about that yellow Moranti.
That's a good question. You know, this is something that has continued to change. Actually, also pretty recently, there's a few different research groups that have been identifying the tallest tropical trees in the world. The tallest trees in the world are in California. They're giant redwoods, but the tallest tropical trees are these dipterocarp trees, which is what the person is asking about. And so while I was in Borneo one year, they had just made an announcement like a year prior that they had found the tallest tropical tree in the world. They sent a team out to go and measure it, and then while I was there, someone else found another taller tropical tree, and so then they had to go send out their team. And so I actually haven't kept up on the news of it exactly, but Denham Valley, Tawau, like there's a few different pockets of old growth forests that have huge trees.
Absolutely. And for anyone watching that's interested in that, yeah, that story in itself is particularly interesting, and they go out in helicopters and do air surveys of those trees, and it's really down to identifying a tall tree, right, and then measuring it.
Yeah, and they can find them with they use what's called LiDAR. It's like the laser version of radar.
Right.
And so they can find the like potential candidate trees with that, and then they'll send a team on the ground to actually like get a tape measure and actually like measure the whole thing in person. So
that's a giant tape measure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So your camera traps are up now in these trees, positioned perfectly. Tell us about some of the things you've seen. You must have captured some incredible things.
Yeah, I mean, the really interesting thing is that like because especially when I started, I think there are more groups and more researchers that are doing canopy camera trap work now, which is really great. But when I started, I just like anything I got was really exciting, and anything we got was something different, something new. Not necessarily a species we didn't know about, but or you know, something new, like a new species altogether. But it was you know, you're capturing behavior, you're capturing you know, interaction sometimes with species that we just don't see very often.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, this is like a huge iguana that was living in one of the trees that I set up cameras in. And it's funny because the cameras they have an infrared motion sensor. So usually it's something that is warm that is moving, and that's why they're meant for mammals. But this iguana actually, it was sunning itself on a branch. So it got its body temperature was much warmer, and then it moved into the shade where the camera was. So it had enough of a temperature differential between the environment that it set off the camera. So
Fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, you do see a real variety of species. Is there a particular encounter or thing that thing you've captured on a camera that's kind of really caught your attention or caught your eye or amazed you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of I will actually, when I was in Borneo, I was really excited because the Borneo, or in Southeast Asia in general, sort of like the hotspot for squirrel and flying squirrel biodiversity. And I really like squirrels. I love flying squirrels. And I had sort of like kind of to some extent had like decidedly gone to this part of the world just because I wanted to see so many of these squirrels. Yeah, so this is a red giant squirrel. It kind of they're actually, it's, you know, again, there's no like size reference here, but they can get up to basically around the size of a house cat. Essentially, this is the largest squirrel in the world. They have that membrane that goes from their wrist to their ankle that helps them glide. And so they live in these super tall trees, and that's how they get around. They're nocturnal. They come out at night, and they'll come out of their nest and they'll glide to the next to another tree and climb up to the top of that. They eat mostly leaves. So they're just gliding around the forest looking for young leaves that they can eat. So
They are incredible gliders.
yeah.
I was so lucky. We were just saying before we were on, I was so lucky to see a gliding flying squirrel, and it is the most spectacular thing you will ever see. It was, of course, at night time, traveling huge distances from these giant trees from one to another. And that particular screenshot. So here we go. There's so much.
Oh yeah. So this is actually in the same tree. I got photos of that giant flying squirrel, that red giant flying squirrel, and this is a pygmy flying squirrel, which is actually the smallest squirrel species in the world. They weigh, I think, about 20 to 22 grams, which is like about the weight of a AA battery, if you can sort of imagine that. But they're really, really tiny. I was really excited to get one of these. You can see him landing over on the left, and then he kind of checks out the camera and takes off. I really wish that I'd gotten better photos of them, but yeah, I was really excited to get those. And the other thing that I didn't realize until I actually saw some of these squirrels in real life, and also, did a little bit more just sort of digging in the literature, is I always thought of flying squirrels as, they leap, they glide, and then they just sort of end up where in the direction. So there's a lot of importance on the direction they jump. But they can actually, they have muscles in that membrane, so they can squeeze them on one side, squeeze them on the other. They use their tail as a rudder, so they can actually really direct their trajectory as they're gliding. So they can go around trees, and as they come to the tree they're going to land, they slow themselves down. They make sort of like a little bit of a J pattern, and then they have like a little thump on the bottom of the tree.
Wow. We can learn so much from flying squirrels, let me tell you. But it's they're fabulous. But just that, I mean, those pictures that you've shown us there, two very different species in one tree. I mean, you talk about communities of species. What does something like that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting is like because I'm setting up a camera that's in one static position, like you think of, I don't know, sometimes you think of like the habitat of an animal as like it's their territory and they're defending it all the time. But the reality is, like, there are lots of species that are kind of overlapping in their territories, and lots of individuals sometimes as well. And that's sort of what we're talking about when we talk about a community. It's different species, maybe different individuals of the same species that are utilizing a similar environment. And in this case, they're, those big trees that they're in, sometimes they're looking for leaves to be eating in the big tree itself. But actually, it's the structure that is really important for these flying squirrels, because it's a huge, huge tree that sticks up above the rest of the forest. So it provides like a really great jumping point to get to the next. If you're going to rely on gliding, then you have to go from a higher place to a lower place, right?
Right.
So that's why these like giant lollipops of trees sticking up above the forest like works so well for them.
Absolutely fantastic. We have some more questions coming in. What's your favorite animal that you've seen in a tree, Kevin? Oh, it's a toughie.
Oh man. Yeah, also a really, really tough question. I mean, the thing is, like, there are a lot of species that I've seen on the cameras that like from the photos that I have never seen in real life, just because I'm out there during the day, and they're mostly going by at night. I have spent the night in a tree before, but I didn't see a whole lot other than like lightning off in the distance. So,
Right.
But yeah, I think my favorite animal that I have actually seen out like up in the tree was actually probably not even a mammal, even though that's sort of what I focus on. I really loved seeing some of the hornbill species in Borneo, because you see them, again, you're like up really high. They're not necessarily landing in trees that are even up at your level. So you're kind of watching them from above. They're landing on a perch, and then passing food to each other. And what's really crazy is when they're flying close to you, you can hear like their like ligaments and tendons moving their wings. They're actually they're it's not like an owl that flies silently. They're like really noisy in their how they, you know, in their flight. But yeah, I don't know. The other one in Panama also is the Rothschild's porcupine is a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why. I have always been really partial to porcupines. I grew up in Minnesota, actually, in the U.S.
Look
and
at
then,
that.
yeah. So you know, this is obviously different than the porcupines that we have in the U.S. The quills are much shorter. But they're just like such an interesting animal. They live their whole lives up in the trees. They have that, you can see their tail. It's a prehensile tail, so they can actually grip with that tail. They can hang upside down if they need to. It provides a fifth limb. And I think, like, I don't know, I can't explain why I am drawn to porcupines, but I think to see these guys and get photos of them was really just really fun, and not something I was expecting. I think the first site that I got photos of them in Panama, I didn't even know that they were in the area. Everyone else did. I just didn't know.
But still,
yeah.
And I guess for you have a completely different perspective on some of these species, which are strictly arboreal, completely tree dwelling. And of course, having those moments with animals you wouldn't normally, like the hornbills you talked about, must just be fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Really great. We've got a question that's come in here. What does a forest canopy mean? Is it multiple trees forming a canopy shape? I've talked about canopy quite a lot, but could you kind of help explain that a bit?
No, that's a very valid question. You know, I think we sometimes when I'm talking about my work or other things, you know, you lock in these words that maybe just aren't meaningful to other people necessarily.
Right.
But when we talk about the canopy of a forest, we're talking about the layer of where like one crown of a tree, like the leafy part of the tree, meets the next. So it's, if you were to sort of look at a forest like in a cross section, like looking at it from the side, you'd see sort of the forest floor at the bottom. You'd see the understory, which is sort of where all the trunks are, and maybe there's a little bit of vegetation. And then at the tops of all these trees where the leaves meet each other, that's what we call the canopy.
Fantastic. There you go. I have to ask you, sweat drinking bees. Tell me about that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So there are a lot of species, especially in the forest, that like they are limited, like they're nutrient limited. So they're always looking for salt or other nutrients that they need in their diet to like make their bodies function. And so sweat is something, you know, I'm just a very sweaty person. And so whenever, yeah, exactly. So whenever I've often been climbing like this, and these are bees. They're stingless bees, which is good, but that they can't actually bite, which is why I'm looking a little bit nervous there. But I was just like so sweaty, and all of this whole like group of bees found me, and it's like, and you can't even see all of them that are on there. They like went all the way across my back as well. But they were just there like drinking my sweat and trying to, you know, replenish their salts. I don't, if you ever go for like a really long run, like you have to hydrate, but you also have to take in you know, salts and electrolytes to sort of keep that moisture. And that's all that they're doing, is trying to get all the salt off my back.
You don't look best pleased about it, I have to say. But I'm sure it's little moments like that in this environment that perhaps you would never think of happening.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I'm sure you've got so many different stories about that. Have you, don't mean to kind of be all damning, but have you had any kind of scary moments? Because I think a lot of people watching will be thinking, oh, hundreds of feet up in the sky in a very unfamiliar environment. Is it quite difficult?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in the grand scheme of things, I'm actually like a pretty like risk averse person, which is why I spend so much time like evaluating the safety of a tree and testing things out. We like do a bunch of tests on the rope before we climb. But at the end of the day, it is, you know, it's dangerous to go up there, and you know, you're mostly almost every tree I climb in, nobody else has climbed. So it's not like there's somebody else that's checked it out for you in advance. Like you don't really know. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely had times where I got, you know, I shot the line over, got my rope in, and then, you know, tested. We do what's called a bounce test, where I'll bounce on the rope first, and then I'll get another person to bounce on the rope with me. And, you know, that combined weight, you know, if it's holding both of us, then it should be okay for me. And you know, sometimes you do all of that, and you get up into the tree, and you hear a cracking, you hear something, and that is really sort of like makes your blood go cold. But yeah. So this was one of those times where I had done all of the tests. I had examined this tree, and it wasn't even the branch that I was on. It was a branch that my rope had actually been leaning against, was not very healthy, and I hadn't noticed it. And I got maybe 10 or 12 feet up in the tree, and I heard a crack, and then all of a sudden I was only 6 feet up in the tree. And this branch was hanging, just dangling right above me. And so I had to, because it was dangling, it was like kind of close to a trail, it was a little bit dangerous. So I ended up re-rigging my rope, climbing up the other side of the tree, and then breaking that branch the rest of the way, and pushing it down to the forest floor so that it wouldn't fall on anyone else. But yeah, that's the branch that almost like fell right on top of me.
A north branch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scary, I'm sure. And I guess something that just comes with the job, and why you need highly skilled people like yourselves. You talk about some of those skills, but they're very important.
Exactly. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I am now recalling that so once I climbed up the other side, I was climbing up there, and I was about to sort of move towards that branch. I put my hand on the trunk of the tree, and I happened to put my hand on top of a wasp nest.
Oh,
so it was like out of a cartoon, like a stream of wasps coming out. They're like swarming around my head, biting and stinging and everything. So then I just like closed my eyes and got out of the tree. And actually, like one of my climbing instructors that I worked with when I was first starting, he used to make us do all of our skills, like setting up our gear on the rope, and climbing up and coming back down, and everything, changing over our ropes. He made us do that all closed, with our eyes closed. He made us tie our knots behind our back so that it was like really built into our muscle memory. And that was why, you know, like I couldn't see. I had to like close my eyes. My ears were like, my ear and my cheek was starting to swell already from the bites. And that's why you sort of prepare for the worst, because sometimes it, like, you know, bad things can actually happen.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And also, to be clear, after that happened, I just sat on the trail and cried for a little while. It was rough.
Oh no! I hope it comes with the job. I'm sure there's big risks involved with what you do. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Now, you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot with your camera traps. You've seen a lot yourself. You have to be fit. You have to be prepared. You have to, as I say, have integrity. I've talked about you working with three-toed sloths before, and sloths in general. What's this about you actually getting caught up in a race with a sloth?
Yeah. So the thing you realize also is, like, you know, I get all this equipment. I have the ropes. I have all this you know, gear to sort of stabilize me and help me move in the tree. But at the end of the day, like, I'm just, you know, I'm like not equipped physically to be up there, right? Like we don't have like the claws or the tails or anything like that to actually be up in that tree. And we think of sloths as being these like very, very slow animals, which I guess they sort of are. But at the end of the day, they're much better. They're much better at being in a tree than I am. And so I was setting up a camera, and I was trying to get myself from like near the trunk to about 5 feet away so that I could get to the right spot for the camera. And in the time I was trying to move like 5 feet in front of me, there was a sloth kind of like this one that had you know, woken up in the tree next to me. It had moved into the tree that I was in, and then had moved on to the tree past me, all in the time that I was trying to move like 5 feet in front of me. Like, infuriating, but also just like, yeah, of course, he's good at this. Like, that's why he can do that.
I just love that kind of comparison. Oh, I got beaten by a sloth. It's fantastic. We've got another question here. What's your least favorite animal you've seen in a tree? I feel like you may have just touched on this from your
Oh,
negative
goodness.
experience, but is there one that particularly just continues to crop up and
You
causes?
know, I don't want to like animal shame any of the species that are up there, but I think that the animals that I tend to have the most problems with are ants. And this is nothing against ants. They're really amazing animals. Like, there's so many different species. They're really amazing engineers up in the trees and down on the ground. And they also happen to be very good at defending the tree that they live in. And sometimes they actually have a symbiotic relationship with that tree. And since a lot of times I'm setting up cameras in fruiting trees, like figs or something like that, a lot of times it means I'm running into ants that are trying to defend that tree. And so those are like, like ants, sometimes they're like really, really big ones that that just sort of swarm you. Other times it's little ones that will sort of get everywhere that you can imagine, and just like pulling them out of my shirt and everywhere else. But there's like, in the Amazon, they have these bullet ants, which have encountered them a couple times. It's really, really painful to get bit by them. So yeah, I think I have nothing against ants like in my day-to-day life, but I will say the most sort of adversarial relationship I've had with an animal has been ants. So.
Is with ants. I understand that entirely. There's been some amazing pictures you've shown us. You mentioned that you haven't necessarily had, hundreds of firsts, but you have had some pretty rare species, right? Can you tell us more about some of the more rare ones that you spotted?
Yeah. So one of the species that I was really, really excited about. It's not it's called a bushy-tailed possum, and it's just, like, it's not like it's not necessarily like a critically endangered species, or not on the endangered species list like you would think. It's not even one that, it shows up in all parts of the Amazon. Actually, it has a pretty big range, but it's just one that it's small, it's only out at night, and just hadn't really shown up on any other wildlife surveys that had been done in the area I was working in. And so it was just like really, really special to like capture photos of this animal alive out in the forest. Like, I looked through other sort of scientific records of this species, and the other records were at times, when they had been logging in a forest and they found one of these species, and then they, killed it and sent it to a museum and have that specimen. But like, there's just very few records of people seeing them like alive out in the forest, or just even in this case, like having photographic evidence of them. They're pretty, just very rare to see or document. And so it was really special to be able to capture it. I found, or in different cameras, I think we collected maybe 60 or 70 photos of them.
Wow.
And it's just, like, it's, again, like I said, it's not like we're finding a new species. It's not like there's, something we thought was extinct is coming back or anything like that. But it is really special to just know that you're adding an important record of a species that we don't really know much about, because we almost never see it. And that's sort of like the only way we can learn anything more about animals is to find them.
Yeah, and it's super exciting and super valuable for that exact reason. What would you like the people kind of watching to learn from your work and what you do?
I think one of the main sort of lessons of doing all of this is kind of what we touched on at the beginning, is that like our understanding of a lot of ecosystems, a lot of species is really biased by our own viewpoint. We are ground dwelling animals ourselves, so we know a lot more about the forest floor, or that's part of why like the deep sea is so mysterious to us as well, because like it's really hard for us to get down there. and so, but there's really interesting life. There's a lot of really interesting processes that go on. The canopy itself is really important. I mean, it's where most of the photosynthesis in the forest happens, and there's just like a lot of things going on, and sort of taking this approach of recognizing that places are maybe inconvenient to get to, but may have sort of some payoff in spending time learning about them. That's sort of been the biggest lesson is, for me at least, like some of the things that have been most impactful and most interesting and most meaningful for me came in places that were really, really hard to access. And that's just sort of a lesson that, we know a lot about the things that we're close to and that are in our immediate surroundings. And yeah, it takes effort to find new things. So
And
yeah.
kind of, I mean, reading about what you've done, it's incredible. You've really been to so many amazing regions, but actually yourself as a National Geographic Fellow and your project with camera traps, that started with that curiosity, wasn't it? Like
Yeah.
what can we learn from these environments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my whole idea of actually putting cameras up in the tree was from, I was working on a survey project on the ground. We were setting up all these cameras and had spent a ton of time getting out to one site where we knew we had to set the camera up, and we got it running, and then an anteater climbed right over the camera we had just set up. And so, like, it's wonderful to see animals, but also really infuriating to know that, like, just the way we were going about this project, that we were never going to catch that animal. And so it got me thinking more and more about, like, what, this is a three-dimensional environment. We should be surveying it in 3 dimensions,
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, the coolest job ever. Right, we have a few more questions coming in. I can't believe this has gone so quickly. It's been incredible. Have you ever fallen from a tree or got injured?
Yeah, that's another good question. I very thankfully have not had a bad fall. I think, like I said, I've had experiences where something has snapped or broken, and I've dropped a little bit, but I haven't fallen all the way to the ground. But I do, in meeting other climbers and other canopy researchers, many of them have had really sort of harrowing experiences, and it's something, and these are all people that are great climbers, probably much better than I am, but you just never quite know. And so that, it's something that's nerve-wracking. You do everything you can to be safe about it. But yeah, I think I've been very fortunate. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I think close calls is enough, Kevin, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Really interesting question. Do you ever use drones to get a look through the canopy? For me, this is interesting. I spoke to somebody recently who does surveys of orangutan nests with drones. Have you ever used drones in the rainforest?
Yeah. So I don't fly drones myself at all, but I have been worked on a project before where we set up, we were flying a drone over to sort of do some surveys of other primate species. This is a drone shot that actually just another researcher who happened to have a drone took some photos and some video of me up in the tree. Yeah, that tree is huge. But there's a lot of potential for using drones up in the trees. It's not something that I have done necessarily, but yeah, I think there's some really interesting work that's been done with them.
Yeah. Where was that clip taken?
That was in Yasuni National Park in Ecuador. So that's a big ceiba tree that is, it was like, you can see sticking up above the rest of the forest. We got all the way up there, and there were orchids up there that it was just sort of like a field of orchids on one of these huge branches that all smelled like vanilla, because the vanilla, like the vanilla bean that we use, comes from a type of orchid, and these weren't like the vanilla orchids, but they're something related. So it was just so crazy to get all the way up there, and it like smells like cookies or ice cream, whatever.
At the top of this incredible
yeah.
another question. Great questions coming in, everyone. Thank you for sending them in. Do you see a lot of effects of climate change in the rainforest? And it's kind of come at a good time because you mentioned the orchids in
Mhm,
Ecuador, and it's my understanding that they're highly they've got a high amount of endemism, right? So the
mhm.
habitat in which they live is limited to those conditions being correct, and we're seeing climate change this. Have you seen that up in the canopies in Ecuador or any of the places you've studied?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what exactly what you're saying about with the orchids. I mean, it's true of a lot of different species, especially in tropical forests, that where they are sort of in a like living at sort of the limits of their tolerance or in different ways and everything like that. So as their the environment around them shifts, and changes, their ability, like on an evolutionary time scale, they haven't had to adapt to things like that, because in some of these places the conditions have been so constant for centuries and centuries. So
Yeah.
it's things like that, like small changes have a big effect on some species. There's certainly some species that are able to move or able to adapt, but others that just really aren't equipped for it. Or if they are going to adapt, we don't really know how, because we haven't seen it happen before. So there's a lot that we don't know, and then there's also some species that we know are really affected by changes in their environment. So yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic answer to a really fantastic question. And
Mhm.
what responsibility do we hold as humans for conservation of nature? What a question. It'll be the last one we can fit in today. But
Yeah,
what
I
do you
think.
think?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good answers to this question. I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is that, like, nature doesn't exist just, for us to look at. We get a lot of benefits from nature being around, natural habitats and species and environments being around. There are the filtration of the water that a lot of forests can provide, and providing oxygen, and there's all sorts of things that services, we call them ecosystem services, that forests and other natural environments provide. So it's not that just that it's like we shouldn't just think of them as like ornaments for us to look at. They're actually playing a really integral part of our lives. And if we lose those functions, then we have to figure out another way to do it that's not just being done automatically
Mm,
in the environment.
mm, absolutely. Fantastic answer. And I'm always amazed, you've worked in biodiversity hotspots. I'm always amazed by the density of wildlife that we have in these particular habitats. And often, if I'm sat here in the UK, you may feel slightly disconnected from an area like Ecuador, but
Mhm.
we're all connected, right? And I'm sure you've seen that on a large scale across all your travels.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, like seeing sort of the connection between forests in, other places that I've worked, to the communities that surround them, it makes it even more clear how, when I come back home, I live in California. We think about our water resources a lot here. It really reminds you that we are really like here in California, we're also very connected to the natural environments around us. We depend on, how much snowfall we get in the mountains every year to fill up our reservoirs.
Yeah.
There's so much about how we live our lives, no matter where you are in the world, that really relies on having a healthy environment and surroundings.
I think that's a lovely message to finish on. Yeah, what a fantastic guy. It's absolutely flown by. I have loved it. I could talk to you for hours and hours. Kevin, thank you ever so much for coming on live.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's been a real joy hearing tales from up trees hundreds of feet high, and I'm sure everyone will be following on with your next adventures when and if they can continue. Any last things you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, just I'm glad that you've been able to do this. It's been really fun to see what the other scientists have been working on. Some of them are familiar, some are people new to me. So it's been really amazing to just get a chance to feel like I'm connecting with other researchers around.
Absolutely. And we certainly finished on a fantastic speaker. So, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
for everyone with their amazing questions today and throughout the whole of the series. A massive thank you for tuning in live, getting the opportunity to connect with some fantastic people dedicating their lives to conservation work and work within the scientific field from across the world. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be part of this series, and an absolute pleasure to chat to Kevin McLean, who is the new tree climber fan. For me, I'm going to be following his work from here on out, up every single tree from forever from here on out. Massive thank you all for watching. This has been a joy. Meet the Expert series. I've been your host, Lizzie Daly, and hopefully we'll see you around soon here on the channel. Bye.